Hello and welcome to our video. So we are going to be working in InDesign again today. We just completed our basic Photoshop project, moving the 6 images that we had created in Photoshop into a single document in InDesign. So you got a few of the basic principles in InDesign. We're going to review some of those. We're also going to go a little bit deeper into the various different items in InDesign that are super important to having a good image and getting all the information you need to create awesome pages in InDesign. If you haven't done so already, you're going to need to go to the jpcomtechwordpress.com website and you're going to scroll all the way down to the bottom here. There is a link to an InDesign tutorial images. These images will come up in Google Drive. You've got various different images here. You're going to download those 6 images. You can do that simply by right-clicking and selecting download, or if you'd like to do them all as a group, hold the shift key, select the last image, right-click, and download. From this point, it's going to create a little zip file for you in Google Chrome. That should show up at the bottom here that it's completed downloading. We're going to hit the arrow, say show in folder. I'm going to drag this across here. There's our file that just downloaded from Drive. We're going to right click, say extract all. This window will pop up asking you where you want to extract it. For now, we'll leave it in our downloads folder. We're going to hit extract. It then appears for us lovely in this folder, shows us where all the images are. So I'm going to take it out of my downloads. I'm going to right click here. I am going to cut this out of downloads and I'm going to bring it over to my F drive and put it into my Comtech folder, into my block 3 folder, and just right click and paste this into here so that now I have those Drive downloads. A little step you can do if you don't want to get confused, because we had the Drive download from before with Photoshop and now we have another one with InDesign. If I select this name here, I can right click on this and I can say rename. We're going to rename this to InDesign. That'll be able to help us tell it apart from our Photoshop. You could do the same with this Drive downloads one. Click on here, right click, and you're going to get to call this one Photoshop. From here, we're now going to open up InDesign. So I already have it open at the bottom. I'm just going to minimize a few things here, and we're going to open up InDesign and get ourselves going on this next project. So if you notice here in InDesign, there is lots of different ways to start a new document. When you have no recent work that appears, you can hit Start New in the middle here. You could also select New on the left-hand side. Control N will bring up a new document, or you can simply go File, New at the top, and we want to start a new document. This will bring up the standard dialog box. By default, it goes into picas, so if you want to stop it from always being the default of picas, we could close this, and our first step would be to go into our Edit, and we're going to go into Preferences. And underneath Preferences, we're going to go to Units and Increments. And this should bring up a dialog box like this that will allow us to change our horizontal increments to inches and our vertical increments to inches. And when we select OK, now when we go File, New, Document, the default is set to inches. So now it automatically comes up using inches, and every other document we make after this will stay in inches unless we go and change those units again to something different. Now for today's project, we're going to be creating a 4-page magazine. So it's going to have 1 cover page, 2 inside pages, and then 1 back cover. So we need to set our pages to be 4 pages. We're going to have ourselves stay with an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, so a standard letterhead piece of paper. We're going to give it a name. We're going to call this InDesign Basics. And then in our case, I'm going to go underscore and then put my last name right so that we know whose file this is when they get handed in later. Okay? For yourselves, make sure that you have InDesign Basics and then put your last name. Don't put right on there. That doesn't help if everybody hands in the same one that says right. You need to make sure you put your own last name on there. Make sure that the checkbox here that says facing pages is selected so that we can move forward and have the pages that are side by side. They will be connected and they will be across from each other in the document. We're going to start with page number 1. We're going to set it up to be 5 columns. So we're going to set up a 5-column document. If we drop down the options for margins, we're going to leave our margins at 1/2 inch for now. Those are slightly large margins. They don't need to be that big, but we can always go past the margins if we see fit. So it's not a major thing to change. And then just because I want to talk a little bit about bleed and slug, we're going to pull down here and we will add 1/4 inch to our document all the way around. So 0.25 inches gives us 1/4 inch. What bleed and slug refers to is if you want to print right to the edge of the page, in the printing industry you need to have more document than you require because they're going to print it on a larger piece of paper than 8.5 by 11 and then cut it down to the size that you've asked for. So if we're doing a booklet that's 8.5 by 11, we're actually printing it on a piece of paper that's larger than 11 by 17 because we have to have enough room for that bleed. So in the case of us sending this to a printing press or to an offset printer to do a large quantity of them, you would need to have the bleed included. If you're just going to print it on your home computer and you don't mind if it scales to fit or if your printer can handle printing right to the edge, you wouldn't need the bleed as much. It wouldn't be as important. But in this case, we're going to leave the bleed on there and be able to use that to create that distance and to create that extra little bit of document that needs to go right to the edge of the page. So once you have these settings set up, 8.5 by 11, 4 pages, facing pages, starting on page 1, columns, we'll have 5 columns and our margins are set to 1/4 inch. We'll then be able to hit create, and InDesign will do the work in the background here and get everything set up so that we are ready to go with regards to our document here. So that's kind of the first step in InDesign and creating a new document, especially a multi-page document. So now, normally if I was setting up a document, depending on what I'd be doing, I would put some images in, I would then put in some text and kind of work together through that. But because you already kind of know how to place images, I'm going to just go over it the one way that I know works the best for this type of document, and then we'll keep moving right along. We'll put all the images in first where they need to be, and then we'll go back and add the text after so that we can see how that relates and how we worry about text wrapping and graphics for our cover and all that kind of fun stuff. So as we already know, we already have the images created and ready to go for us, but we need to create those placeholders. So we need to go to this placeholder rectangle frame tool with the X through it and select that, and we want our cover image to go right from the top of the page right to the bottom. So I'm going to make a box that goes all the way from top to bottom on this first page. You'll know you've created the box because that X will show up in it. And now I'm going to go to my file place, and I'm going to place from the InDesign folder, I am going to place the image that says cover photo. Okay, if you notice, this cover photo is plenty big enough to fill the box here, but it's too tall. It's not the right width for this type of box. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to fit this differently. So we're going to right click on our image here, and we're going to change the fitting to fit content proportionately. And that's going to shrink it down just a little bit so we can see what's going on with our image and see where the error might be in our image. Well, in this case, what we're having trouble with is not only the fact that we need extra image for the bleed, but also that we don't have any width to this image. It's not wide enough to cover the entire page. So we're going to actually edit this image on the fly in Photoshop. So a really cool thing with InDesign and Photoshop is that they work hand in hand. You can open up photos in InDesign and then edit them in Photoshop, and when you save them and go back to InDesign, it will update those changes. So what we're going to do in Photoshop is just create some extra space around the outside of our document. So if you right click on this document and you say edit original with, so edit with Photoshop, it's going to open up Photoshop for us, and it's going to open up that document in the background. Now, we just got to give Photoshop a second to load here. Once Photoshop loads up, you'll notice that it has brought in the image for us, and it has placed it into the middle of the page. So we know that we need to have a little bit more space at the top, would be lovely, so we have more space above her head, and we also need to have more space on the sides of the picture. So the easiest way that I know to do this is to simply make our canvas a little bit bigger, and then we're going to use the content aware scale features in Photoshop. If you, in order for this to work properly, I would suggest creating a duplicate. So we're going to drag this down to the new layer button and create a duplicate of this layer. You could also right click and just select duplicate. There's many different ways to copy a layer within Photoshop. Now this back layer, the original, we're just going to turn it off so it doesn't accidentally get in our way or get ruined. In case we really screw this up, we're going to need to go back to it. And now we are going to adjust our canvas size. So as we know, we would like to have more space on top and more space on the left and the right. So we're going to go at the top here to Image, Canvas Size. And in this canvas size pop-up that comes up, we can adjust where we're going to scale. So if where this dot is represents where our actual image is. So we want to put our image at the bottom so that now it's going to expand the image to the left and the right evenly, as well as up and at up angles, I guess you could say. This shows the computer we want you to add more to the top and sides and no more to the bottom. So now in our height, we had an image that was 22 inches high to begin with. We're going to change it to be 25 inches high. And our width that was 15 to begin with, we're going to change that to 18 inches. Okay, so 25 for the height and 18 for the width, and that gives us a nice new document. When I select OK here, it's going to expand my canvas size to give me more space above and more space on each side of that image. Now obviously I could just scale this up, but that doesn't really help our problem. We want the girl to stay in the same relative size. So what Photoshop has is a really cool scale tool that is called the Content Aware Scale. So if we go to Edit, Content Aware Scale here, it'll bring up the transformation tool just like we would have for any other document, but it's going to analyze the scene for us. And when I drag this right-hand side out, if you notice, it doesn't affect the girl at all. It just adds more to the background. it actually looks at the image and says, oh, he just wants to make the background a little bit bigger. So by doing that, I've now created more space on the left and the right. Photoshop has just filled in this gray gradient for me and created that gap. Now when I go up and down with it, you have to be careful because it'll start to make her taller, right? So I can't just stretch her all the way up because now it kind of made her physical body change in size. So you may need to do this and then let go and then scale again depending on what kind of look you're going for. The other way for us to fix this, because now if I continue to scale, it just wants to keep stretching her and making her torso longer, which is not relative to her. We want to keep her the same size. So we need to fill in this top section of our document with more of this same gray color. So the way that we can do this, we've finished transforming here. So all you have to do is hit the check mark or the enter key on your keyboard, and it will save that transformation. And now, similar to what we did the other day in Photoshop where we took out the light stand, we can actually create a box using the rectangular marquee tool here, this square box. At the top, we can draw a box that fills in this blank space at the top of the document. And you could simply right-click and say Fill, Content Aware Fill. And it's going to interpret the design and realize, oh, he just wants to extend that black towards the top. So now we've created a seamless background that has more space on the top and more space on the sides so that it will fit better into our title page and allow us room to put a title graphics on the top and around the sides. Now, a quick little trick, what we're going to do is we're going to save this. So we're just going to go File, Save As, and in this case, because we don't want to save it as a Photoshop because it's already a linked graphic, we're going to save it just as a JPEG, and we're going to let it save over top of our original cover photo. Now, if we wanted to go back later, we would need to save this as a Photoshop document as well. So we're going to save it as both. Once as a JPEG and overwrite the other one. So the first time we save it, it's going to warn us and say, are you okay? Do you want to replace this one? We're going to say yes. When you save a JPEG, it gives you some options here. We want to have it be the largest quality possible. So this slider should be all the way to the maximum to make sure that it only condenses it as much as it has to and doesn't go crazy and doesn't lose all of our graphic quality. Push OK. It'll save that JPEG for us. And now we also want to do a File Save As, and we want to save it as Cover Photo PSD. In case we wanted to make adjustments later, I would hate for us to ruin the original and not have access to it. So this gives us the ability to go back and to readjust things. So save it as a PSD, and you're good to go. Now the last step before we get out of this photo, later on we're going to want to have her head be in front of some text. So we need a version of this photo that doesn't have the background. So similar to the tutorial that we did taking the girl in the field, taking the white background out, we're going to take the background out of this photo. Now it's not as easy because we're working with gray coloring and she has brown hair. So the contrast that we're working with is not as easy as when you're using black hair on a white background. But the concept and the principle still works. So what we simply need to do is we're going to take the quick selection tool. We're going to select her body as best as we can. And it doesn't have to be perfectly accurate because the text is only going to go above where her hair is. So now this is the tricky part. We need to get a bunch of her hair selected and a little bit outside of her head. And then we'll try to get the rest of this image at the bottom here selected. Now I went too far. I want to select down here. I don't want this gray on the side, so we'll take that out. So you use the Alt key to minus your selection. So now I have her hair selected and her arms, and I'm not concerned about this gap inside here right now because our text is not going to go behind her waist. It's only going to go about shoulders and then up from there. So once I'm at this point and I want to take her out of the background, I go to the Select and Mask button at the top here. This will drop her out of that background. If I want to see full transparency, I can crank this up to 100%. In this case, that probably would be a good thing to do. Again, like before, I'm going to go to my edge detection. I'm going to give this a smart radius so it knows, and I'm going to go about 10 pixels. Just so it softens these edges around her dress and around her arms so they're not so harsh. And then I'm also going to go into the output settings at the bottom here, and I'm going to check this button that says Decontaminate Colors. And then it should show up like it did before with a new layer with layer mask. And when I select this Decontaminate Layers now, I can come up here and I can use the Decontaminate or Refine Edge tool here, and I can refine where this is taking out the background color. So I'm going to need to zoom in here because I need to see what's going on with this girl's hair. And I am going to click on the Refine Edge brush again. And just like before, when we selected just outside of the image, it now interprets and says, oh, he wants to get rid of all the gray. So I can quickly go in here and take out everything that's of that same color tone. Now, it's obviously going to remove some of her hair, which could be an issue because the tone of her hair and the tone of the brush is so similar. But for today's image, for what we're doing, it's not crazy bad. It's not the best picture ever. But what we can also do is we can shift the edge now. Now that we've told it where to take out, we can give ourselves a little bit more back and allow that to be part of the blend. We can also adjust some of the feathering, how much it blurs, how smooth it is, how sharp it is, and we can also fiddle with the contrast if we wanted in terms of making that be a little bit more defined. Okay? So we want it to look like the words are going to go behind her head. Once we've tweaked the settings, we get it the way we like it. Like I said, it's not totally perfect. We're going to make an adjustment after this. Make sure that it says Decontaminate Colors. That is... Actually, I like it better with that Decontaminate off. Let's uncheck the Decontaminate Colors. And let's still go to New Layer with Layer Mask. And we're going to select OK. So this is now going to turn off those other layers and give us a picture of this girl with no background. Now, because the mask is not perfect and we want to have a nice clean line, especially at the top of her hair, we're going to do the mask ourselves custom. So we're going to select this mask, which is this secondary graphic beside the background copy number 2 that the computer created for us. We're going to select this mask and we're going to go into with the paintbrush, and we're going to need a smaller brush here, and we're just going to clean up these edges and take away some of these really obvious strays that make this look really fuzzy as opposed to nice and sharp. Now we want to leave some of the strays over here and let those blend in, but on this front side, her hair should be pretty smooth. We don't want there to be too many objects that are sticking out, making it look funny. Okay? Now I can zoom back out again and I can show you how it's done. So it created a transparent background everywhere that we had selected, and it's given us, it's still left some of the background in between her arms, but you'll notice later when we put it into the document, it's not going to matter. So this photo here now needs to be File, Save As, and we're going to save it as Cover Photo, No Background, so that you get one photo that has the background and one photo that does not have the background. And I'll show you how to layer those two over top of each other in a moment. Once we're done in Photoshop, we can minimize or we can close this document and we can go back to InDesign. Now in InDesign, because we made adjustments to this initial document, it's going to ask us here in our links panel, it's going to have this cover photo is going to need to be adjusted. If you notice, it has automatically updated, but now we have a big gap of black and these big gaps on the side and a gap at the bottom. So we need to refit this image to our box. So we're going to right click and just say, we're going to click on the box first, right click and say fitting, and then fit content proportionally. Now it's not quite fitting edge to edge, it's not going as far as the bleed, but that's okay. We can simply click on this circle in the middle here and we can extend this image out. It's not as important to have the full dress at the bottom as it is to have space above her head. So we're going to click on here and hold Shift and manually drag this to fit our box on either side. And now we will get that background image to show and to fill the whole entire screen. Okay, so now that we have this image completed, we're going to move on to page 2, 3, and 4. And put the images in for those pages, and then we'll work with our text and maneuver our text around the page. So page 2 here, now this shows up on mine. I don't know if it shows up on your version of Photoshop, the way you might have your, of InDesign, the way you have your pages set up. But if you go to Window, and if you notice my Pages one is selected, I'm going to move this Pages panel out into the bottom here, and I'm going to actually close down this CC library one and put it away as well. And it gives me some more space to work here. When I select pages, it'll then pop out and jump in front, and I can see the different pages. If I double click on any one of these pages, it will take me to the next page in our booklet. So this first image for the first page here is pretty much done. We're going to move on to images that go on page 2, 3, and then on to page 4. So on image 2, the way we're going to design this is we want to have 3 pictures at the top of the page that are the same size or are very similar in size. So similar to when we brought in our Photoshop documents into the same thing, we're going to bring them into here, but this time we're going to do all the placement and the boxes all in one step. So we're going to go File, Place, and we are going to place the 3 images of the green dress together. So these ones, image 1 inside, inside 2, and inside 3. So you can hold the Control key to select all 3 of those. So click on the first one, hold Control, select inside 2, and select inside 3. Now you have 3 images selected, and when you push Open, your placement gun or your placement logo here will have the number 3 beside it, showing that you're going to be placing 3 different images. Now, just like the other day, we're going to click and drag to create a box, but if you notice, it wants to create a box that's the full size of the page. Well, I want to have 3 individual boxes that are the same size. So I'm going to push the right arrow 2 times, and it's going to draw me those 2 boxes. It's going to make 3 individual spaces. Now, I know that these are portrait-sized photos, so I need to make sure that they go down a little bit so that they're not landscape. Because if I placed them right now, those portrait images would look awfully weird, squished into a little tiny box. But if I extend this a little bit and I make the boxes taller than they are wide, when I let go, it will now automatically place those images into the boxes and make them look nice and neat and tidy. Now, I went a little bit too far, and so I want to adjust these and make them a little shorter. So at the top here, I can simply drag down because it already has all 3 images still selected. And at the bottom, I can just bring this bottom up to the top to make all 3 images look identical and match. Okay? Now I want to have these lined up with the top margin. So again, without deselecting anything, I'm just going to click on the middle image, and I'll be able to move all 3 of them, drag them up to the top to create 3 exactly the same size images, all nice and proportionately scaled for those 3 graphics at the top, all in one step. Now there's 2 more graphics that we want to add into this picture. We want to add 1 graphic in this lower right-hand corner and then 1 graphic onto the next page. So these 2 graphics are a little bit special because I've already gone to the work to take out the background and make them transparent. So when we place them in, they're already going to be a transparent background image. So the first one we're going to place, so go to File, Place, is the inside graphic.psd. So inside graphic.psd gives us this picture of this girl sitting down. So again, we want to make sure that we don't, if we just clicked place, it's going to go as big as it can go, and it's way too big. So we want it just to be in the corner of our image. So we might start here on this third column, and go right to the edge. And then when we let go, you'll notice the picture jumps in, and we can move it down to the bottom of the page here so it looks like she's sitting at the bottom of the page. Now if you want to make it a little bit bigger, you're more than welcome to scale this up a little bit. Right click on it, say Fit Content Proportionally, and it will jump up the size just a little bit more for you. Okay? Makes for a nice image. It looks like it's supposed to be there. It looks real crisp. Looks like she's sitting on the edge of the page. You could even nudge it over to the right-hand side a little bit so that it nestles right in against the edge of the page. When we go to our back page here, so page 4, I just simply double-click on page 4. It's going to bring up our back page for us. And we're going to now go File, Place, Inside Graphic 2. And this graphic we want to make, because her head kind of gets cropped off and her feet, or legs I should say, we want to make it go all the way top to bottom of the page. So it's going to be super huge all the way along here. Now some of you might be noticing, depending on your graphic settings, that this picture looks a little bit blurry. And that is because right now, by default, InDesign is in a medium preview mode. So if I went to my View setting here, my View tab, I go down to Display Performance. If I selected High Quality, it would clean this up quite nicely and show me the high quality version of the photo. Now, when we're working on a 4-page document with only a few images, not a big deal to be working in high quality mode. If you had a 100-page document with lots of high-res photos, high quality mode would tend to get very big and very clumsy and hard to work with. So make sure that you're only doing it as much as you need to so that you can see what you're doing. So we're going to stop here for today. Make sure that you save this document. Go to File, Save As, and it's going to already come up with the title that we chose earlier, InDesign Basics _write or _ your last name. Make sure you know where it's saving and then just select Save. And we'll take a break. This will be broken into 2 parts. And hopefully you followed along. Hopefully you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, please email me so that we can get those questions answered for you. If you like us, that would be awesome, as well as you could subscribe to our channel. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a good time.